At 10 a.m. in northeastern Mexico, a mirror-still pool conceals the vertical abyss of El Zacaton, where two divers prepare to descend beyond daylight. A hiss of gear, one steady breath, then silence as twin lights slip under. Only one will return. Today we will go over the tragic case of Sheck Exley and his final moments in the unforgiving depths of El Zacaton. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to see more true exploration stories. In caves, the path forward means nothing without the path home, a thin guideline held by a gloved hand, its beams swallowed by black stone. Lose it, and the cave keeps you. Sheck Exley knew this better than anyone, a quiet math teacher on land, a titan below. He wrote the rules, then dared the abyss that breaks them. His world lived under rock and time, cavern ceilings, sinkholes, vertical shafts that swallow daylight whole. Below 100 feet, the sun dies. The silence presses like weight. For most, a nightmare. For Exley, a calling. He brought order to darkness. Gauges, depth marks, arrows on line, notes in a wet notebook, calm breathing, cold decisions. He treated risk like math and lived at the edge of the possible. 4,000 cave dives, first to log 1,000. System after system, he went farther, longer, and always came back. Respect was earned in silence and in exits. One number stalked him, 1,000 feet on scuba. Not just depth, pressure. At that range, biology bends, metal complains, minds wander, most turn back. The place was El Zacaton, green on top, black below. Exley would not go alone. Jim Bowden, rival and friend. Two minds, one plan, one nod, one breath. They dropped. The hiss of life support, the line paying out. The world above sealed behind them. Two descended. Only one would surface. This is how Sheck Exley met the deepest pit on Earth, and why the law to find the way out matters. The story begins. In the sprawling, sun-drenched suburbs of Jacksonville, Florida, Sheck Exley was born into a world that seemed, on its surface, entirely ordinary. But from his earliest days, it was clear he was wired differently. He was a quiet, introspective child, less interested in the boisterous games of his peers, and more captivated by the internal world of thought and imagination. His mind was a natural home for patterns, logic, and the elegant certainty of numbers. While other children saw a playground, Sheck saw geometry. Where they saw chaos, he perceived an underlying order waiting to be deciphered. This innate analytical lens was paired with a fervent love for science fiction, tales of astronauts venturing into the unknown, exploring alien planets and navigating the hostile vacuum of space. These stories weren't just escapism. They were a blueprint for a yearning that was taking root deep within him, a desire to journey to places no one had ever been before. He was a boy with the mind of a mathematician and the heart of an astronaut, living in a landscape that held its own hidden alien worlds just beneath the surface. This analytical nature found its first professional outlet in a seemingly conventional career. He became a high school algebra and trigonometry teacher at Suwannee High School in Live Oak, Florida. To his students, he was Mr. Exley, a calm, methodical presence who could unravel the most daunting equations and make abstract concepts feel tangible. He taught mathematics not as a dry academic subject, but as a language for understanding the world, a tool for solving complex problems with precision and clarity. His classroom was a domain of logic, where every problem had a solution if one followed the rules. He was known for his patience and his ability to connect with students who struggled, showing them that the path through a difficult problem was a step-by-step process. There was a right way and a wrong way, and the difference was a matter of discipline. This daily practice of instilling logical rigor in young minds was, in retrospect, a rehearsal for a far more demanding and dangerous application of the very same principles. Because outside the structured certainty of the classroom, this same mind was drawn to a different kind of problem-solving, one that took place in the absolute darkness of the water-filled caves hidden beneath the Florida landscape. The state's placid surface, dotted with crystalline springs, was merely a facade. Below lay the Floridan aquifer, a colossal subterranean labyrinth of limestone conduits carved by millennia of flowing water. These were not just caves, they were the arteries of the peninsula, a vast unmapped wilderness. For Exley, the dark, beckoning mouths of the springs were portals. They were the real-world equivalent of the alien landscapes he'd read about as a boy, a frontier that was not in the distant stars, but right under his feet. The challenge was irresistible: to apply the cold logic of mathematics to the fluid, unpredictable, and utterly unforgiving environment of an underwater cave. His journey into this subterranean world began in 1965. At just 16 years old, he earned his scuba certification. Like many new divers in the region, he was immediately drawn to the unique allure of Florida's freshwater springs, places like Ginny Springs and Peacock Springs. These natural wells offered unparalleled visibility, a constant cool temperature, and served as windows into that vast underground network of limestone caverns. The initial dives were intoxicating. The feeling of weightlessness, the silent beauty of the sunlit basins, the dance of light rays piercing the water, it was a profound escape. But for Exley, the true fascination wasn't in the light. While most divers were content to stay within the sunlit basins, enjoying the recreational limits of the sport, Exley felt an irresistible, almost magnetic pull toward the dark openings that hinted at a world beyond. Where others saw a forbidding black hole and felt a primal fear of the unknown, he saw a question that demanded an answer. What was in there? How far did it go? What secrets did it hold? He was captivated not just by the beauty, but by the challenge of exploration itself. Each cave was a puzzle, a three-dimensional maze that had never been mapped, a problem that had never been solved. This was the ultimate test of his logical mind. What immediately set Exley apart from the handful of other early cave explorers was his meticulous, almost clinical approach. He didn't see himself as a thrill-seeker. He saw himself as a scientist and an engineer in a hostile environment. He treated every single dive like a complex mathematical problem, with variables that had to be controlled and accounted for. Air consumption, depth, time, distance, decompression obligations. These weren't just numbers, they were the components of a life-or-death equation. In the absolute blackness of a cave, hundreds of feet from the nearest exit, there was no room for improvisation, no tolerance for error. A single miscalculation could be, and often was, fatal. His methodical nature, honed in the classroom, was now his most critical survival tool. His reputation for methodical, relentless exploration grew at an astonishing pace. Between 1965 and 1970, he systematically pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. He wasn't just diving, he was conducting a grand underwater survey, one dive at a time. His dive logs from this period are a testament to his discipline, filled with precise measurements, detailed maps, and objective observations. By 1970, just 5 years after his first certification dive, he achieved a milestone that was, at the time, almost incomprehensible. He became the first person in history to log 1,000 cave dives. In an era when most divers were lucky to survive a few dozen, Exley had turned the most dangerous sport in the world into a systematic, repeatable science. He wasn't just racking up numbers, he was fundamentally inventing the sport as he went. The equipment was primitive, the techniques non-existent. So, he developed them. He experimented with different ways of laying a continuous guideline, the sole lifeline back to the surface. He refined his gear, modifying regulators for better performance at depth. And most critically, he pioneered the concept of staging safety bottles, placing extra tanks of breathing gas along the guideline at strategic points. This created depots of air that extended range and, more importantly, provided a crucial backup in case of an emergency far from the cave's entrance. These innovations were revolutionary, born from his own near misses and logical analysis of risk. Today, they are the bedrock of standard cave diving practice. This drive to create safety protocols was fueled by grim reality. Exley saw firsthand the deadly consequences of carelessness. In the late 1960s and early 70s, cave diving was earning its reputation as the world's most dangerous sport, one tragedy at a time. Untrained open-water divers, lured by the beauty of the springs, would venture into the overhead environment without a guideline, without sufficient air, and without backup lights. Panic, disorientation, and death were frequent outcomes. Exley was often the one called upon to perform the grim task of recovering the bodies of his fellow divers. Each recovery was a somber, first-hand lesson in what could go wrong. He analysed every accident with the same dispassionate logic he applied to his own dives, determined to understand the chain of events that led to disaster. He dedicated himself to creating a rigorous code of conduct, a set of unbreakable rules designed to prevent these tragedies. His most enduring contribution was a simple but brilliant concept for air management, born from his mathematical mind, the rule of thirds. The logic was irrefutable. A diver would use 1/3 of their starting air supply for the penetration into the cave. The second third was allocated for the exit. The final, crucial third was to be held in reserve, untouched. This final third was the margin of safety. It was not for extending the dive, it was for solving problems. This emergency supply could be used to deal with an unexpected delay, like fighting a strong outflowing current. It could be used if a diver became briefly entangled and needed extra time to cut themselves free. Or, in the most critical scenario, it could be used to share air with a dive partner who had suffered a catastrophic equipment failure. It was a simple, elegant rule, but it created an unbreakable buffer against the unforeseen. It transformed air management from a guessing game into a calculated plan. He applied the same logic to another critical system: light. In the open ocean, a light failure is an inconvenience. In a cave, it is a death sentence. The darkness is absolute, a physical presence that erases all sense of direction. To combat this, Exley stressed the principle of redundancy. He mandated that every cave diver must carry a minimum of 3 independent light sources, a powerful primary light, and at least 2 smaller, reliable backup lights. The failure of 1, or even 2, would not leave a diver stranded in impenetrable blackness. Like the rule of thirds, it was a simple protocol that provided a powerful layer of safety. Through his writing, his teaching, and his personal example, Exley began to transform a scattered community of risk-takers into a disciplined fraternity of explorers. He co-authored the first cave diving training manual, Basic Cave Diving, codifying his principles for a new generation. Divers listened because his authority was absolute. They knew his advice wasn't theoretical. It was forged in the darkest, deepest, and most dangerous corners of the earth. He was the man who had been there, pushed the limits, and returned, not by luck, but by logic. He was building a foundation of safety that would allow others to follow him into the dark. In the arid landscape of northeastern Mexico lies a geological wonder. The largest and most mysterious of these is El Zacaton. From the surface, it appears as a near-perfect circle. But this serene image masks a terrifying reality. It is the mouth of a colossal vertical shaft plunging deep into the Earth's crust. Unlike other cenotes, the Zacaton system is geothermal. For millennia, volcanically heated, acidic groundwater has been dissolving the limestone from below, carving out an abyss deeper than any known water-filled pit in the world. The water itself is a hostile environment. Visibility is limited, and below 100 feet, the sun vanishes completely. The pressure rises with terrifying speed. The shaft's verticality presents immense physiological dangers: nitrogen narcosis, the bizarre effects of high-pressure nervous syndrome, and the risk of carbon dioxide buildup in a rebreather. For a man like Sheck Exley, who had set depth records around the world, El Zacaton was the ultimate prize. The siren's call was irresistible. The morning of April 6, 1994, broke warm and clear over El Zacaton. An air of quiet, focused intensity settled over the dive site, a stark contrast to the immense unseen pressures waiting below. This was not just another dive, it was an assault on the deepest known underwater pit on Earth, and the preparations reflected the gravity of the undertaking. For Sheck Exley and Jim Bowden, the day began not with a rush of adrenaline, but with a methodical, almost ritualistic assembly of their life support systems. Every component of their closed-circuit rebreathers was laid out, inspected, and assembled with surgical precision. The carbon dioxide absorbent, a chemical that would scrub their exhaled breath, was carefully packed into its canister. A single channel or void in this material could be fatal, allowing a buildup of CO2 that would lead to hypercapnia, a silent and insidious killer at depth. Exley moved with his characteristic calm. His confidence came from his meticulous preparation, transforming anxiety into focused action, leaving nothing to chance. He triple-checked the calibration of his oxygen sensors, the electronic hearts of the rebreather. These sensors were the only thing preventing a fatal dose of oxygen at pressure, or a hypoxic gas mix that would render him unconscious. The protocol was absolute. Trust the consensus of 2 sensors if a third deviated. He then programmed his dive computers, inputting the complex sequence of gas mixtures they would breathe. For the crushing depths they aimed for, air was a poison. They would descend on trimix, a carefully blended cocktail of oxygen, helium, and nitrogen, designed to mitigate the debilitating effects of narcosis and oxygen toxicity. Their bottom mix, for the deepest phase of the dive, would contain as little as 3 or 4% oxygen, a mixture that would be unbreathable at the surface. The plan was a symphony of logistics. Their descent would be a controlled fall into darkness, aiming for a rate of 100 feet per minute. But going down was the easy part. The ascent would be a grueling, multi-hour affair, a slow crawl back to the world of light and air. To survive it, they relied on a robust bailout strategy. Strapped to their bodies were multiple independent scuba cylinders, each filled with a specific gas for a specific depth range. These were their lifeboats in the abyss. If the rebreather failed, a catastrophic event known as a loop flood or a total electronics failure, the only option was to switch to an open-circuit bailout tank and immediately begin the ascent. This redundancy was the bedrock of their survival plan. Finally, burdened by hundreds of pounds of equipment, they were ready. With a final nod to the support team and to each other, they stood on the precipice of history, ready to leave the sunlit world behind. Around 10 a.m., the 2 divers slipped beneath the surface. The transition was immediate and profound. The cacophony of the surface world vanished, replaced by the gentle hiss of their rebreathers and the sound of their own breathing. They followed the descent line, a thin nylon thread connecting them to the surface. At the 100-foot mark, the last vestiges of sunlight were extinguished. The water, green and inviting at the surface, was now an absolute featureless black. Only their powerful dive lights cut the void, their beams seeming to be swallowed by the immensity just a few feet from their masks. Jim Bowden was in the lead, his light a distant star below Exley. They were 2 solitary explorers charting parallel courses into the abyss, connected only by photons and a shared, audacious goal. Their communication was reduced to the simple, pre-arranged language of light signals. A circle meant OK, a rapid slash meant attention or problem. At this depth, there was no room for ambiguity. As he approached 700 feet, Bowden began to experience difficulties. The helium-rich gas they breathed, while preventing narcosis, was incredibly dense at this pressure. The physical effort of moving it in and out of his lungs and through the rebreather loop was becoming extreme. Each breath was a conscious, laborious act. At a depth of approximately 925 feet, a new, more alarming symptom appeared. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably. He was feeling the initial tremors of high-pressure nervous syndrome, or HPNS. The sheer hydrostatic pressure was compressing his nerves, causing them to fire erratically. It was a clear, undeniable signal from his own body. He had reached his absolute physiological limit. To continue deeper would be to risk convulsions and certain death. He had to turn back. He signaled his turn, a slow, deliberate sweep of his light. As he started the long, lonely journey upward, he watched as Sheck Exley's light did not follow. Instead, it paused for a moment, perhaps in acknowledgement, and then continued its inexorable descent. Exley was now completely alone, a single point of light receding into the infinite black, committed to pushing onward into the unknown. Beyond 900 feet, the cave was no longer a place, but a pressure. Weight upon thought, weight upon breath. He was alone in a column of black water where even sound seemed to compress. Each movement had to earn its oxygen. At that depth, physiology changes. Gas is denser. Every inhale and exhale takes work. The mind, deprived of easy breath, narrows to the immediate, the line, the numbers, the light. He monitored for the early signs of high-pressure nervous syndrome, fine tremors, a slight flutter in the fingers, a sense of being hurried by nothing. HPNS is pressure acting on nerves, turning signals noisy. He breathed deliberately, steady, measured, knowing that workload is the silent enemy at depth. The rebreather would scrub carbon dioxide, but only if he kept his effort low. The shaft drew him downward, a hollow with no walls in the beam, just the line falling into night. He was past records, past footprints. The numbers told him he was where few could even imagine being. Then, a small drag, not a jerk, a suggestion. Something touched the guideline and did not want to let go. A hose brushed the cord, or a bolt snap angled just so. In caves, millimeters matter. What begins as a whisper of resistance becomes a problem that asks for hands and time. He paused, neutrally buoyant, to clear it. Glove against cord, a careful lift, a twist, a slide. The visibility was little more than a cone of dust. Task loading crept upward. The line held a faint bend, nothing dramatic, just friction against hardware. He tried again, patient and methodical, knowing speed would cost more breath than it saved. Effort rose. And with effort, carbon dioxide. CO2 is the body's metronome. When it climbs, your brain shouts for more breath. At depth, that demand can outrun the machine. Rebreathers recycle exhaled gas through a scrubber to remove CO2. But scrubbing is not instantaneous, and it is not infinite. High workload creates more carbon dioxide than the loop can clear in time. The feedback loop is cruel. CO2 climbs, air hunger rises, you breathe faster, workload increases, CO2 rises again. Tunnel vision creeps in, focus frays. He worked the snag with small, deliberate motions, trying to keep the heart slow, but the depth taxed every system. Gas density turned each breath into labor. Acute hypercapnia, the medical term for high CO2, does not announce itself with drama. It arrives as confusion, a rising heat in the chest, the feeling that the next breath is never quite enough. Decision windows narrowed. At this depth, a bailout to open circuit is possible, but costly. Gas goes fast, work climbs, the ceiling of decompression obligations presses down. He had planned for failure, multiple lifelines, but plans depend on cognition. Hypercapnia steals clarity first, then control. The tremor in his hands deepened. HPNS layered on top of CO2 load. Pressure on nerves, pressure on breath, pressure on time. He tried to buy space, stop, breathe, think. But the margin was gone. The loop could not keep up. The black pressed closer. Overwhelmed by a perfect storm of hypercapnia and HPNS, cognition slipped. The hands slowed. The struggle ceased. His light remained, an artificial star in an ancient night, painting a small cathedral of silt and rock in pale white. Around it, the cave absorbed the news without comment. Water, stone, silence. Above and far away, Jim Bowden was already on his way up, committed to hours of staged decompression. He had signaled his turn earlier. Exley's light had continued downward. From Bowden's perspective, there was only protocol. Ascend, stop, wait, breathe, and do not break the ceilings that keep bubbles out of blood. At that depth, rescue is not a choice. Physics decides. The distance between two lights in a pit that deep is measured in hours, not feet. Information moves slowly. So does hope. Recovery would take days, teams, plans, and limits. The pit's geometry, the depth, the decompression burden, each imposed a boundary that no willpower could erase. There was no panic in his equipment. Later analysis would show a physiological cascade, not a failure of nerve. The systems worked until the body could not. Lessons endure. Manage the line as if memory depends on it, because it does. Keep workload low at depth. Respect the narrow windows where decisions still matter. Plan conservatively, then plan again. Staged cylinders are not bravado, they are lifelines. Redundancy is not weight, it is permission to return. And remember that depth is not an opponent to defeat, but an environment to endure. On its terms, not ours. His light for a while marked the place where human curiosity met its limit. Then even that faded. The world's greatest cave diver had gone down into the cave and would not be finding the way out. What followed would test a community he helped build. When Bowden finally broke the surface after his own arduous 9-hour decompression, the question was immediate. Where is Sheck? As the sun set, the grim reality sank in. The planned triumph had ended in tragedy. Plans shifted from rescue to recovery. Days later, his body was found at approximately 885 feet. Analysis of his recovered equipment confirmed he had not panicked, but was overwhelmed by a fatal physiological cascade. News of his death sent a shockwave through the international diving community. The man who seemed invincible was gone, a sobering reminder that no one is immune. His legacy is etched into the very fabric of technical diving. The rule of thirds, the emphasis on redundancy, the unwavering discipline he preached, these are now fundamental doctrines. He transformed a reckless pursuit into a calculated science, and in doing so, saved an unknowable number of lives. His story is a permanent fixture in diving lore, a cautionary tale and an epic of courage. For more true stories of exploration and human courage, stay tuned.